Welcome to another episode of Money for Nothing. I am Rob Castaneris. Today's episode is about dating and money in 2025, and we're going to stick to Gen X. And why would we do that? Because this would go way differently if we were to talk about any other generation. It'd be a totally different conversation. I'm part of Gen X, so I figure why not start here. And so today, I've got Kevin Sullivan with me. He is a good friend of mine. He's also a financial advisor. He too has also seen how money can really get in the way of a new relationship, a not so new relationship. I am very curious to see how he weighs in on this, his 2 cents. So Kevin, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
This is pretty cool.
Thank you.
So, am I crazy here? Like, is this a thing that we should be talking about as like money guys? And because it seems to me that this is a very easy way to get tripped up, because this is like the one place where you actually have to talk about our finances and think about everything else. So we're, our jobs, friends, like we don't have to talk about our own money ever. And this is the one place where it's totally unavoidable and yet like totally necessary. And you had to have experienced this either like on the job or personally or both. Like this has to be a thing, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think a lot of us avoid the conversation amongst friends, professionals, dating, spouses. But I think it's a huge topic, very important. And I've had it come up in relationships, friendships, things like that. So, I think it's something that's, I think it's not an easy path to get to, but I think that's probably what we'll talk about is how do we get to that conversation and what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, we'll get into the good stuff eventually. Let's do this professionally first. So, I mean, you're 10, 15 years on the job, definitely more than 10. Like, and how many relationships have you seen that have gotten messed up one way or another by money? And, at some stage we become confidants and we hear about this stuff. And so, I know obviously my experience, but like this has to come up with some frequency, right? Like throughout the year, like people will talk to you and it becomes not about investing at all. It becomes like, Kevin, I'm going nuts here. This whole thing is going to fall apart if I can't get this figured out. And it's not a call for help, but it kind of is.
Oh, I'd say, it definitely comes up. Not with every client, obviously, but for sure, it's a situation where, kind of like I said before, I don't think a lot of people want to talk about it, but it is something that has to be addressed, that should be addressed. And I think that's the key part, is getting over the hump, being comfortable having the conversation about what you're comfortable with. So if you're married, that's one thing. It's probably a little more apparent what's going on. In dating, it's a totally different topic because you don't know, and you're just meeting this person. You're not necessarily that comfortable with them yet, but even if you are, how do you address those topics? So.
And here's the problem: is our generation is told that we shouldn't, right? Because the generation before us, like our parents, I gotta believe that just about all of us were taught, what's the saying? You don't talk about money or politics.
Yeah,
right? And
keep it to yourself.
Now every day, these days we talk about all of it all the time because there's no more rules and no more boundaries. But like, given what we were taught. You don't talk about money. It's like long term, it's a recipe for a disaster, right? Because like even if you like somebody and you don't talk about money, it's inevitable that it's going to, bite you because you didn't have conversation that you should have had earlier. But even that's like getting ahead of ourselves here. Like at some point, probably in the beginning, right? Because like, all right, so if you're a Gen X, we are what, like 45-ish and 45 to 60. So we've all been around the block a few times. None of us want to suffer through BS or having to beat around the bush. Like we all just want to know, like, what are we getting into? Who is this person? Do I have any chance of getting along with them enough to, hopefully like have a life together? And yet you cannot do that without talking about money. Like, how do you do your money? And it's as simple as that,
Yeah.
right? Except no one's going to bring it up, or it comes up on accident or just by observance or inference. So, like, I don't know. The first thing that I'm curious about your take on this is, how soon should this happen? Because the more I think about it, like, it can't be soon enough. But, you know, there's like rules, right? So, like, where do you stand on this?
Well, I think based on what you and I do, and when I, that comes up in conversation with anybody, really. Well, what do you do? I'm a financial advisor, so for me and perhaps for you, it comes up maybe quicker than people that are dating that are not in our industry, because typically then people will start asking, like a date may start asking me, a little bit more about my job, or they might spill the beans like, oh my gosh, I definitely need to talk to somebody, or I don't save enough, or so little glimpses come out of potentially, what kind of situation they're in. But I think it's a fine line. I don't think it comes up on the first date. I think that's way too early.
Yeah.
But I think, if it's somebody that you're talking to and you're, maybe a month or two in, I think it's fine to kind of dip your toes in to see what kind of situation or what their goals are. I think that maybe that's a better way to approach it. What's your idea of financial freedom or something like that, without, asking them for their balance sheet,
Right. So you ask for their credit score, right?
Exactly.
And then it goes, tell me about your checking account balance. And look, all right, so a month or two, there's like the opening salvo. Sounds about right. It feels both short and long, right? Like, it feels like kind of too soon, and also feels like, oh my God, am I going to have to wait this long before I find out? Like, does this person hate money, or do they obsess about money? Because like both extremes are a problem, right?
For sure.
I asked ChatGPT to tell me a little bit about what Gen X is, at our core, and what are we characteristically known for. And the theme of the whole thing is that we are practical. I mean, I obviously did not make the cut in that that net that got cast on Gen X, but practical, adaptable, fine, and then what was the other? Pragmatic, right? So like the theme there is that, like, let's get to it, no BS. I want to know what I'm getting into, and so when you say it like that, a month or two seems long. True or false?
When you say it like that, I suppose, yeah, yeah. But I think it's also, I think every situation is going to be a little different. So some people might be very, very forthcoming right away, and others may not. So I think you kind of have to gauge that person individually. Similar to what we do as all of our clients are a little bit different regardless of what they make or what they have. I would say it's pretty similar in the dating scene, where it's like some people might be embarrassed, and some people might want to flaunt, and I maybe flaunt's not the right word, but let like, look, I'm very independent. I'm financially independent. Some of them tell you that.
Have you been on social media before?
Yeah, yeah, right.
This is exactly what it's designed for, to flaunt. And this is a totally different topic, right? For me, like, the less social media, the better, because even a good story that's being told there is like a questionable story, because how can you know if this is like something that's being curated for me to be impressed by, and is it legit, right? So totally different conversation. But yeah, the flaunting thing made me think of the word that's always at the top of my mind on this topic, which are values, which is like, it's a very like adult word to talk about this, but it's got to be top of the list, because everybody, I'm convinced, like, we don't necessarily know what our own values are, because we don't get asked this question, and why would we take any time to sit and think about like what are my financial values? Like that's dumb. No one talks like that,
Yeah.
right? And yet, like the way that each of us conduct our lives, we all have them, right? Like I got out of debt, like credit card debt when I was 30, and I swore it's never ever happening again, right? Like I didn't know at the time, and maybe I didn't know it until 10 seconds ago, but like I guess that's been a value of my sincerity, because like I've managed to stick to that because I never wanted to go back there, right? So everybody has values that are real near and dear to them, that are non-negotiables, and on the other side there are some that are absolute deal breakers. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, you have to, I guess you don't have to, but I bet you've got at least one or two that you personally are dating somebody, if you are personally dating somebody, and you find out that they conduct themselves in this way about money, or they believe this about money. It could be the nicest person and otherwise very, very compatible, and it's just not going to work. Please tell me. Now I want to know. I wasn't planning on asking this, but I bet you've got one or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one, it would be debt, right? Like in debt, not just any debt.
Oh my God, we're so square. Holy cow!
I mean, I'm. It goes back to what you said, kind of how I grew up, my values, things like that. Where, I'm scared to be in debt or debt that's going to eat me alive, right? Or so, I probably wouldn't be very adaptable to somebody who's spending money with no regard to their future. So to have that in the scene, I would just tell you that I think debt would be the number one red flag, if you will, for me, without a doubt. Any
other ones?
I don't know. I think that's the number one because if I think that goes hand in hand with maybe just spending money frivolously, excuse me, or just not. I don't know. I feel like, from my standpoint, and with being in the business with clients, it's hard to build wealth if you have a bunch of debt that doesn't make sense. So, not that I'm looking for somebody that has a bunch of wealth, but do they have some discipline around debt? And if they do, then they probably have some discipline around building wealth. And that's, to me, that's attractive.
Yep. All right. So we bring this down a notch, and let's say that there's something that's not a deal breaker, but that is something that you observe or you learn that you would rather they not exhibit or like have as a trait. Like if you, I guess personally, you ever date or get to know somebody and you learn something and it's like, oh, that's not awesome, but it's also not like a deal breaker, because there's levels to this, right? And some things are just make it an absolute no-go, and some are like, oh, okay, well, no one's perfect.
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to what I just said was, you don't have to have created this, a mass amount of wealth. So I don't really care about a number or anything like that, right? If you are, independent and working towards goals and things like that, to me, once again, that's attractive. If somebody was like, look, I haven't saved anything for retirement, I wouldn't say like, oh, this is a no-go. Yeah. I really wouldn't. If they said, yeah, I don't save any money, and I have all this, they're just spending money that seems a little obnoxious. To me, that's probably going to be a red flag where I'm like, it's unlikely that we're compatible from that standpoint. But I wouldn't say just because somebody's concerned because they don't have enough money for retirement or they haven't even started, that wouldn't be a no-go for me.
Yeah, so another layer to this is cultural norms and like what we are supposed to. I hesitate even saying that word because I don't know. It's a new generation that is basically suggesting to us that these things that we think are supposed to be the case are kind of dumb. For example, a man always has to make more money than the woman. Go.
I think it's obvious that that's not the case in a lot of situations.
Obvious. Interesting. I think I think there are still a lot of people that are like right there in our age bracket that are going to get uncomfortable if there's like a meaningful deficit in the amount of money that our significant other makes compared to us.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't know that is. Maybe I misunderstood the first question. To me, it's not that wouldn't be a deal breaker, right? But I do realize that culturally, it's probably still uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? Even though it shouldn't be.
And yet,
and yet it still is.
What does that say about us? Is that because it's? I wouldn't love it either, and so I don't know. That's. Maybe that's on us. Maybe it's not. Maybe we're just taught like, you are the provider, and as a result, like I don't know, do we derive like a bunch of our self-worth from like being the provider? And this like hunter-gatherer stuff, like this can't be like 10,000 year stuff, can it? Because it does seem dumb, and yet like I'm totally guilty of it.
Yeah, so I haven't run into the situation yet. And I don't mean that in a arrogant way or anything like that. I haven't run into a situation like that. So I can't really say, I wouldn't. I'd be fine with it, right?
You're not cold calling like female managing partners at law firms, like trying
to
date the richest people you can find.
No. But yeah, I think it's something in the last, call it, couple decades that has changed, where there's many more partners that are making more, or females making more than males, and so I think it's something new in the grand scheme of things that men are getting used to, or having to I don't want to say deal with, but are they comfortable with it? That's the question, right? And I don't think that everybody is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that most of us aren't. All right, so that's cultural norm number one. Here's number two. A big difference in assets or like family wealth, right? I think this is another quick one, another common one that causes friction for people. But you deal with it, right? Because like you're not going to leave a good relationship because like that person's family has a lot more or a lot less wealth than you, and yet it creates difficulty for some reason, right? So I guess the first question is like, if there's a huge discrepancy, I'm going to go out on a limb and say for you and me, that's not a problem. I think for many people, it probably is. For some people, it is. But I won't speak for you. Like, is that a problem? Or is it something that you just deal with? Or is it something that, like, when you are dating, like, is this a practical thing to look for and try and avoid if there is a discrepancy, a big one in either direction?
Sorry, so are you asking like family money? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If their upbringing, right, is such that is massively different from yours in either direction, like you could make the case that like, hey, this isn't going to work. You guys are just too different.
Yeah, I don't personally believe that.
Okay.
Did you grow up differently? Did you have, do you have different economic, economically growing up, was it different? Yes. I think at this age, I don't think it should matter. I mean, for me, it wouldn't personally matter to me.
Yeah.
On either end. I think it's, I don't know. Maybe when I was younger, I don't even think that would be the case, but, maybe if you're not as economically secure and you're younger, and that might be attractive. I mean, I'm sure some people have stayed in relationships because there's some financial means there on both ends. To me today, I would say it wouldn't matter either way if it was. I don't think that difference matters to me as much.
Yeah, I don't think it matters enough to be a deal breaker. I also do think it takes a level of maturity for it to not matter enough. We probably just barely make the cut. But like, I think there has to be some level of like empathy to know that like, just because their experience is way different than yours, like, doesn't mean it can't work, and that you can't just figure out a way to, understand those differences, and like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. And I feel like I see it a lot where it is a big thing where there's like resentment because their significant other's family does things totally different. To which I'll say like, yeah, it's different. Like, it's okay that it's different.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think maybe for some people it just like strikes a chord that like that difference is just like too much to bear. Or
I get that. And I think you have the right word. Like you brought up resentment, and deep down there probably is in many situations resentment there. But it's how do you work through that, right? So if the resentment never goes away, it's not a good situation. The relationship will probably suffer. But is there a reason for the resentment? I can see why there's some resentment, underlying. But if you can work through that and just figure out what it actually is, then I think then there shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. So, two things that I found interesting that I learned from. Thanks to ChatGPT. It's amazing, by the way. And I think it sort of supports I guess my overall thesis on this would be that values, I think it has to be the most impactful factor in deciding if a relationship is going to work, right? Because like, no matter how much money one person makes relative to the other, or if their family background is totally different than others, if there's some similarity in values, it can work. And if the just the quality of the values or the values themselves are like really different, I don't see how it can. One of the things I found interesting on ChatGPT is, if you were to just put in Gen X and dating, like real academic research there, I know. But you type in those few words, and the thing that comes up is, tips for dating and Gen X. It basically just regurgitates what you said. And number one was excess spending and materialism, right? Which, between those two things, like, they pretty much have you and me covered, right? For like the things that would bother us the most, right? So you say excess spending, and for me, if someone is just fixated on like things over either experiences or even just saving, or maybe basically just anything but just buying stuff for the sake of buying stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like, I don't mean to be a hypocrite either. Like, I like stuff like the next guy, but I guess I'm talking about what I would consider like an excess. And if it is just, a thing where the other person is just interested in like gathering and accumulating stuff, like, it's just a huge problem for me. And maybe it's because, I've got some kind of nervous tick that like makes me throw everything away, and I'm like, I love empty rooms and like being a minimalist, but like that's just like a big thing for me, and I don't know why. So values points to that being, for us, excess spending, materialism being top of the list as to like why something is not going to work. The other thing I learned from ChatGPT escapes me at the minute. I will get to it. But if you were, as an advisor or just as someone who's been around the block a few times, if you were to put together a list of things that people should bear in mind or just flat out do when it comes to their money and looking for a partner and out there dating, I'll put you on the spot here. Like, what would your list look like if you were to be advising somebody on things that they should do, or ways that they should think about their money if they don't want to mess it up?
So we've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah.
I'm just very systematic in a lot of things that I do. So it's, very repetitious, or, I like repetition. I like a system. It makes me comfortable.
Explain the gym habit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's as simple as that. I think it kind of bleeds into other areas of your life. If you have a system in place for money, even if it's very simple, like, reducing or getting out of debt and then systematically building wealth, it's hard to screw that up, right? I mean, you don't have to overthink it, right? You don't have to find the next hot stock or find the next sector that's going to be, the best. It's just putting it on repeat, being disciplined to do it. So I would say that about money. I would say that about family. I'd say it about friends, fitness, health. So anyway, if that answers it, I would say if you share a common appreciation for that discipline and that repetition in a system, that's I think that kind of goes hand in hand with some of your values that you have and things like that. I think if I found a partner that had some of those similar traits, I mean, that would be wonderful.
Well, how about when it comes time to talk about it? Because you know the system and the way that you like to do things, but I imagine you're not asked very often to like explain it, or that you're encountered with somebody who has a totally different system or no system at all, right? So, this is starting to sound like how you'd advise yourself here, but like, I think this might be the point of the whole, conversation and why this is so difficult is that absolutely everybody does it different.
Yes.
We are hardwired to think that different is weird or strange or bad or inferior. And we just happen to be talking about two like really important things, right? Finding a partner and taking care of ourselves financially. And these things absolutely have to intersect if you are in the market to meet somebody. And how do you do it without not screwing it up? Because I'm convinced like this is not an easy thing to do, especially this is probably why the saying goes, like, as you get into your 40s and your 50s, like, dating just gets harder as you get older. We're set in our ways. We want what we want. And it's just going to be the case that I think our tolerance for people doing it differently than us goes down. So I think your system is great. It definitely works. I am wondering how we handle people who, just in general, and this is questions for everybody, you and me, and it's like, how could you possibly get good at dealing with somebody every day who has a totally different way of looking at their money and handling their finances? It starts to seem impossible until you think about it. But I know it's not. So it's just maybe it's just like a paradox. It's just something that's just going to be hard for forever.
Well, I think being open to, right, like I have a system, you have a system, we all have a different system. They're probably, I'm going to throw out a number here, but 75% of that system is identical and 25 is different. And so, you may not agree with some of the things I do and vice versa, and that might be, with a partner as well. So I think if we, and that's fine. We should have our own beliefs and our own core values. I feel like maybe over the last 5-10 years, I've been a little more open to saying, oh, well, your system is different, but let me ask you about yours. And maybe I can take pieces from that. And I do that, and I know this is a financial topic, but I do that with like fitness and health as well, because there's always a little thing. If I take 2% of what you have to say and I add that to mine, that might be better than my 2% that's over here. So being open to it being a little different, even though you still keep the core value and core fundamental belief that you have, I guess be open to like, oh, well, maybe that will make my overall picture look better. And I think that's probably where we have to be if we're going to be compatible. And if we're real rigid on some of those systems, we're probably not going to be compatible with many. So if there's a core belief that you both share to a certain extent, and some of the things are different, I think you learn from each other.
Yep. I'm going to give you a compliment here because I don't think that that is a financial advisor thing. It seems like it at first, right? But to ask a question about how somebody does it, I think on the job, like you're asking somebody because like you have to, or you're supposed to. But I think when it comes to like our personal lives, like I think it is. I don't think it's as common to make inquiries like that because money is so personal and it's like emotional, and I don't know I'm not saying it's super rare to ask questions about somebody else, but I do think it's absolutely imperative if you're going to have any chance because people might like talking about themselves, but I really just don't think people like talking about their own finances. So like if you're not asking that question, how could you possibly learn about the way that they do it until it's, you're learning about it because it's about to break, or you're learning about it because you're just like disgusted by it. And like, this is all something that like you could have asked about earlier if you had the wherewithal to ask for it. So I think that's like, where your set of answers to this like question that, that I asked you about, like, what can somebody do to like increase their chances? That is a cool noise. Oh, that's a timer. Our time's up, but it's not. But the time's not really up.
10 minutes.
And so that was definitely my playbook of a recommended list of things that somebody just absolutely has to do if they're going to have any chance of not screwing up a situation where they found somebody that they like, right? And it's just the case where, like, if you're not asking questions, and tactfully, of course, and and without being a creep about it, but you have to be innately curious. Otherwise, you're either going to find out too late, or you're going to find out certainly much later than you would have wanted to, because then you just wasted a whole bunch of time. And these things really are deal breakers, or they can be, because you're talking about integrating finances and actually starting a life together.
Yeah.
If the way somebody does their money is just untenable with yours, it's like no one's at fault, really, except for the two of you for not finding it out earlier.
I want to add something to this. So I had a conversation Sunday with a good friend of mine who does very well. He's never been married, and now in his mid 40s, has been dating somebody for a significant amount of time now, and they're talking about getting married, and they both have their separate finances, and both do well. So, but they're going to keep them that way. So, the point there is that they've already had that conversation where they're most comfortable not merging those. They're and they're probably not going to have children at this point. So I think it just goes back to asking more questions, being more curious about their situation. I think the more you ask, the more you're going to find out, is this a deal breaker? And the chances, I truly believe there's probably not that many deal breakers out there, right? Like most of us are probably on the same page for the most part. Nobody wants to be in debt, but most of us probably are. And this goes back to what you were just saying. If we let it go too far down the road, now it just seems like I'm judging you if I don't agree, right? Whereas I could have just asked a question, and it's not easy, but the more curious you are, I believe, the more you're going to find out about that person, what makes them tick, and what's important to them, and maybe some of those things that we aren't doing the exact same could come together, right? It's so I think we could probably kind of sum that up. Just ask more questions, right? And when you're first dating somebody, you kind of want to, we talk about ourselves, and we're trying to put our best foot forward. So yeah, they don't have to be deep conversations, but I think conversations and questions about what's important to them financially, things like that, would most likely help.
Yeah, and so your friend, who they've been dating for a while, and they have arrived at a system that seems like it's going to work for both of them, right?
Yeah.
To your point earlier about everybody has a system, what I find interesting is that might be true. I think there are a lot of people who couldn't tell you what their system is, just because they've never been asked and they've never had to articulate it before, right? So like those two people that you just mentioned, they do have a system, but for the people that don't, or they don't know what their system is, that in and of itself is going to be a problem. It's not going to be like the contents of the system. It's just going to be the fact that they don't really have one, or they don't have one at all. And so like if they don't have one, then there's nothing to discuss. Whereas, which kind of interestingly, makes the case that there might not actually be a wrong system. Like if it works for both people, that system could be maximum debt at all time, and like that, that might make you nauseous to even think about. But like they're, hey,
yeah, you never know.
All different sorts, right? Yeah. So, but hey, if both people are on board with that, and that's their thing, like they're going to be able to subsist together, and it's going to be fine. Their finances aren't going to be fine, but like but for the purpose of dating in this conversation, right? Like, so I think what we're sort of backing into here is disclosure, right? Which that word kind of suggests that like maybe it's the right word, because I think we all have, you mentioned putting your best foot forward. I do think a part of that is like not showing the ugly parts. Right. So like, for sure. Which is the opposite of disclosure. So, and yet like that, if you're going to get anywhere, you can't just show the pretty parts. Right. So like, so disclosure, and I was going to say curiosity. I just think maybe it's just more empathy of like that's probably not the right word either, but like, how do you do it? I guess maybe it just is curiosity, because like if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, it's a problem waiting to happen, and it's going to come for you no matter what.
For me personally?
No, it's in general, right?
Oh,
like if someone's not asking, right? So like, I guess those are probably like the two, like you got to be honest, and you can't, and you can't hide anything. So like being honest is more than just like, don't lie. Being honest is like, all right, like there's things you should know, and they're not all awesome, but here they are anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so like that's the disclosure piece of this, and I think the other piece is, ask the questions and find out the stuff that you need to find, because like people aren't jumping out of their chairs to volunteer it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It may sound like a financial advisor question to ask, but kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's like, once again, this is probably not date one, maybe not date two, but as you guys are knowing, getting to know each other, like what's financial freedom look like to you? Because I think that opens the door. I personally believe it opens the door. You could go anywhere from there, because that could be for somebody. Yeah, I need, $5 million by the time I'm this, and I want this and this. And it could be, and you're going to get to know a lot about that person. I think they might be like, well, I'd love to retire at, blah, blah, blah. Or I think it's an easy way to head into that direction, or that conversation, or have that conversation that's not super offensive. And you just mentioned it for Gen Xers, we're probably not going to share too much. We're probably going to keep our guard pretty close. So is there a way to like open that up a little bit? And I think that might be a way to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's the conflicting thing is like, yep, we're going to play it close to the vest, but we also want to know, like right now.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't want to, we don't want any BS, and we don't want to wait. And let's just like get to this, because we are practical, and and so that's the conflicting thing, right? Is that like we're reluctant to share everything, and yet we also want to know everything about the other person, because we don't know what we're getting into. So that question is interesting, because it's definitely like a job related question, and that like it could also very much work on a date. And I've got an idea of like what an awful answer would that be, for you. Like, it sounds like it would be like someone who would say, financial freedom would be the same thing as regular freedom, and that I don't have to work, and that I enjoy my life, because life is short, and right? So is that about right? Is that like the deal breaker answer for you? Because the the person has no interest in financial.
Well, I think everybody. I shouldn't say everybody. I think most people do have. They do have some level of interest in finances because it affects everybody.
Yeah.
So it may not be, for some, because it's all relative, right? So for some people, it may be all they think about, and for some people, it might not be. They don't think about it at all, and most people are probably somewhere in the middle. But is it a deal breaker? No, I think it's just a way to. Okay, well now I know. Like you want to retire someday, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have to work forever. So money, obviously, that takes money. But that doesn't mean you have to have a villa in Italy that's going to, be $4 million. It might be, you want to travel every once in a while. I think it's a very complex, obviously it's a very complex conversation that's pretty deep and probably goes on and on. I think that's just a nice starting point to get things started without saying, what's your balance sheet look like?
Just ask that. I would like an income statement and a balance sheet, K1 if you have any, and email them here by midnight, and then maybe we can go out again. That's not going to work. It did remind me of the third component, I think, of the thing to tie a bow around all this, and for me personally, but I think this is pretty universal. But moderation, I think, is going to not exclude you from a lot of people, because if you are too far on either side of the spectrum of aspiration, either too much, just for me personally, and it's not a bad thing, but I think it's it probably just maybe does speak to like a aversion to like materialism or accumulating for the sake of accumulating. But like if someone were to say to me like I want to accumulate X million dollars by X age, it would be clear to me like that would be something of like maybe not a fixation, but like a key or top priority. And right or wrong, that would be a turnoff for me, because it is and I don't know why. Maybe because it seems imbalanced, or maybe just because I know why. Probably because like those values, that person's values and mine like don't line up, right? Like I kind of like money like the next guy, but I'm lucky enough to like really like what I do for a living. So like I'm actually not in a hurry to retire, and the accumulation of money for me is like not as important as doing interesting things, getting to do interesting things every day, kind of like this, or the job itself. So, to me, a lack of too much aspiration, ambition is almost as bad, maybe sometimes worse, than not enough, right? Depending on the severity there. So, I think we solved it. I think,
sure.
For people in our age group that are dating, you've got to be curious, forthcoming, and balanced. Thanks for working on that with me. I'm glad you agreed to it, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you think we missed or we didn't cover?
Half of the divorces or whatever they come about or because of finances. So it's I think it's a topic that's very important. And that translates obviously past marriage into dating on the other side. So I think it's a very important topic that nobody really wants to talk about. And I don't know that anybody has like this, this perfect guide to how to handle it. So I think this is a good intro to, what do we do out here, right? What how do we make this successful? And I think you called it. It's being curious. It's being open. It's asking questions. And it's finding who, what the person's values are. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. It feels like there's a lot that's said or written about marriage, but like this seemed interesting to me because you can't get to marriage until you get the dating part right,
Yeah.
and it just seems that there's a lot of dating endeavors that never get off the ground because this isn't talked about enough, or it's talked about too late, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that that's got to be the case. So I don't think this is going to solve that, but we can at least try and put a dent in it. And yeah, so until next time, thanks for making the trip, man.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
I appreciate it, man.
Well, that's all we got for today. Thank you for watching.